The SEC, of course, is coming in with a big bulldozer and paving the way for what will be a Bitcoin ETF road to heaven. My name is Paul Barron. Welcome back to Tech Path. And of course, you guys are joining us right here in our new studios. And one of the big things that we're doing, of course, is trying to pump out a lot more content, mainly because of just the amount of research and the amount of data that we're hauling in on a day in, day out basis. It's going to mean a lot for you. And of course, if you have not joined already, make sure and jump into what we call the Diamond Circle. The Diamond Circle is very simple. It's a place for you, our members, to join in on the Paul Barron Network and be able to do a lot of things. One thing, of course, is get additional courses and also insights from me on some of our analysis. So we'll be doing a lot more custom token analysis and more research coming in over on paulbarronnetwork.com. And additionally, you're going to be getting digital rewards and a whole slew of other assets and things that will be dropping in our live stream. So make sure and do that. Let's get into the focus of today's topic, and that is the issue around Bitcoins and where the ETF is going. I want to jump to this first story here. The SEC just approved the closest thing to a US Bitcoin ETF that you can buy for now. And of course, really for what this is, it's a new exchange traded fund. Maybe the closest as investors can get to having a Bitcoin ETF, at least for now. The Securities and Exchange Commission has approved Volt Equities ETF, which is essentially a ETF that tracks companies that hold a majority of their assets in Bitcoin or a derivative, and a majority of their profit or revenue from Bitcoin-related activities like mining, lending, manufacturing, etc. So if you look at some of the companies that would be in this, it'd be like MicroStrategy, Marathon Digital Holdings, obviously Marathon Bitfarms. I would say someone like a Hut 8, also in the mining. Those kinds of companies essentially would be the element that Volt would be out there. So this is much like what Cathie Wood would do with her ETF that maybe would just be centered in on Bitcoin holdings. Now, this being approved, is it a big deal for Bitcoin? This in itself is not a huge aspect of where this could go from an ETF track. But what it does do is it starts to create this whole area around the SEC to essentially kind of start to move in this direction. And I think that's the key that is really going to be the big next step. Now, the big next step is this right here, where SEC has basically extended 4 Bitcoin ETF deadlines by 45 days. What this means, it's a decision timeline for the ETFs, including Global XBTO Trust, has been extended today by the SEC. Basically what they're doing is 45 days to roll out the approval for Bitcoin ETFs. And this is the ones that are running on Bitcoin futures. And this to me is the one that is more important than anything. But the companies that are involved here is, of course, Bitcoin Trust, the Valkyrie XBTO, Bitcoin Futures Fund, WisdomTree Trust, and then the Kryptoin Bitcoin ETF were all rescheduled to November 21st, December 8th, December 11th, and 24th. So what could that mean? What this means is it's a futures trading ETF. Simply meaning investment houses, traditional investment opportunities out there, even retail investments would have the opportunity to invest in futures trading. Now, does that have a direct effect on Bitcoin itself? In a roundabout way. Now, it's not buying Bitcoin, the actual digital asset, through these ETFs. It's buying futures, so they're betting on the price movement, obviously, within Bitcoin. Now, why would that potentially drive the Bitcoin price? Well, the key here is a lot of institutional organizations will usually invest, well, not usually, always invest in underlying assets when it comes to a futures trading valuation. So that in itself will have some bleed over effect in a big way, maybe in a bigger way, to actually affecting the Bitcoin price. This, I feel like, is going to happen either in November or December with these new dates being essentially laid out. I want to jump back to the article here because it does, these dates are the ones that are very critical, I think, for Bitcoin pricing of it getting to the 100K. And that is the November 21st date. That's going to be a very important date. December 8th, December 11th, and the 24th is a little bit later in the year, but it definitely is the one that we need to be watching in terms of all these kind of things. Obviously what they've done here is The United States investment firm Invesco joined forces with New York Galaxy's digital funds to file a Bitcoin ETF called Invesco. That's going to be another one they're currently awaiting approval. And it's widely expected that the introduction of the first Bitcoin ETF by the SEC will elevate the asset's technical indicators as a surge of traditional investors enter the market. What that simply means is you've got the opportunity here of the futures trading ETFs leading the way. Obviously, we have the Volt ETF over here betting on companies who essentially have assets and or profits coming from Bitcoin. This is all moving in the direction that we've been anticipating for the past 6 months, that ETFs will come. And now with Chairman Powell also and Gensler even making the statement that the likelihood that a ban on cryptocurrencies is not going to exist here in the US simply means that maybe the regulators have finally come to a reality check here and understanding that Bitcoin and cryptocurrency projects are here to stay and they are revolutionizing the financial markets as a whole. So back to the story. It's widely expected that the introduction of the first Bitcoin ETF, this is the one we're talking about because this is the big boy, will elevate the asset's technical indicators and a surge of traditional investors enter the market, as we talked about. But the Bloomberg analysts recently predicted that the SEC could approve an ETF by the end of October. Now remember, these dates that we're talking about for these futures have been delayed. So here's my question. Are the SEC regulators currently trying to craft together an ETF right now, maybe even ahead of the futures? Or are the future trading ETFs going to be the first ones out of the gate? Either way, it's going to be a positive move in this bull run for Bitcoin. And it does mean something in terms of price action, because this is something that we've been looking at for quite some time. We've layered it into our sentiment analysis in terms of the terms that we're tracking and how that relates to price action. Remember, price action is led by sentiment and, in our consideration, amplification of that sentiment. And what does that mean? It means we're going to see some action happening in Bitcoin again. And if you've been watching some of our videos, and if you haven't checked out our last one, which is Bitcoin in October to 75K, check that video out because there is an interesting layer of data that is starting to show up both on a low side of around 48, and I think the high side was in the 63 to 67 range, where the data is basically flowing into the potential of where Bitcoin could end in October and November. This is going to be very key because a lot of what's happening right now around these ETF approvals, both from the future side and maybe a full-fledged Bitcoin ETF, are all timing at a very interesting time right now with all the things that we're hearing from Chairman Powell, from Gensler, and also from Congress, who is pushing the SEC in a very different way. I'm hoping to get Congressman Emmer back on our show because I think he is going to give us some insights on maybe where Congress's direction is going for 2022, which is going to be interesting to watch. But I just want to jump over here to the forecast, Bitcoin weekly forecast, ready to tackle 60,000 as investors front run ETF approval. Bitcoin price likely to hit correct to the 50K. This is the thing that we've anticipated, and I'll show you the chart here in a second, that we do think we're going to see a little bit of a correction here, which we've said might be another buying opportunity around the 48K mark. And this should be an interesting retracement level around 54,182 is what this potential analyst is looking at. But the descent will set the stage for a run up to the next psychological level, which is 60K. That's the one that's going to be interesting to watch. That 60K one is the one that I think really sets the fireworks off. Don't get me wrong. We've been flying and retracing an excellent movement here in Bitcoin, mainly because of what we've seen in a little bit of whale manipulation, a little bit of promise on the ETFs, and also a lot more activity in retail investors based on the blockchain data that we're pulling in. On-chain metrics reveal holders in profit have increased. So all of you, kudos to you because you've been holding, you are now in profit, and you're supporting the short-term correction thesis. This is the whole aspect of where we'll see Bitcoin kind of moving into this next layer. Bitcoin adoption, regulation plays catch up with adoption. This is another big feature and something that is going to continue to hit the, I think, the news cycle here with what's happening. But Bitcoin adoption in 2021 has been stellar from increased usage of Bitcoin in El Salvador. Again, El Salvador now, their population, get this, their population, I'm going to try to pull the story up for you in a second, but their population is holding more Bitcoin accounts in their digital e-wallets than bank accounts. Tell me that the banks aren't running scared right now. This is El Salvador. This is what was a decade ago a third world country. Now, what their president, Bukele, has done is positioned El Salvador into potentially being one of the richest countries in South America. I think this is going to be something very, very interesting to watch. I want to jump to the story right here, and that is El Salvador, more people having Bitcoin wallets than traditional bank accounts, right here from Forbes. Let me kind of zoom in on this. This is pretty interesting right here. They, of course, rolled this out September 7th. Bitcoin law granting the currency legal tender status went into effect, remarkably just 1 month, where Salvadorians would now have more Bitcoin wallets than traditional bank accounts. This is where I think things get really interesting for both South America, but also into the whole theme of adoption and potentially domino effects in South America. We've already talked and seen about Brazil potentially moving into making it legal tender. If Brazil moves into the position, remember, Brazil about 50 times larger than El Salvador, Brazil moves into it as one of the South American nations, you're going to see other countries that have weak currency scenarios potentially rolling into this. That could mean Chile, maybe even Argentina. There's so many opportunities here of where this can fly. And with Bitcoin really on tilt right now, the El Salvadorans are the ones that are benefiting from this. So as they invest money, U.S. fiat dollars, into Bitcoin, they're essentially increasing their GDP and their wealth of the country. What could be, in Bitcoin standard, if they had done it back a month ago, we would see maybe a 3 to 4x run up here. Imagine if you had a country's wealth that 4x'd in less than a year. What would you look at? You would look at that country becoming one of the leading nations in terms of economic advancement, what they'll see in terms of infrastructure development, what they'll see in terms of their population becoming more affluent. It'll change the whole economic element of South America. And I think other countries are watching this very closely, and also are looking at it in a way that I think starts to maybe put a little people at odds with the strategies that is happening there. So again, all of this, Bitcoin ETFs, El Salvadorans are, of course, accelerating the adoption, and when everybody, including the World Bank, said they would not, and in fact they did. So a lot is moving into that space. And get this, this was coming over from the Token 2024 conference. I just want to show you the headline on this right here. Bitcoin is back above 50K again, but its rate of growth will be eclipsed by other tokens, eventually rendering obsolete, the founder of Avalanche said. And what he meant by this is that essentially there are a lot of projects that are currently out there, including Solana, Avalanche. You could look at Cardano and many others that have kind of moved into this space of very high pace adoption. The other thing is that their technology has started to leapfrog what has happened with what Satoshi Nakamoto wanted Bitcoin to become, which really was a store of wealth. Maybe it's the new digital gold, but the opportunity here, and likely, is that in the next 18 to 24 months, we could see one, if not many, of these projects start to move into the number one position and control market share when it comes to the overall valuation of cryptocurrencies, including surpassing Bitcoin. I know that is heresy, you might say, but fear not, because the whole idea is that cryptocurrency and blockchain technology will still feed off of the baseline of what Bitcoin's blockchain manifesto essentially laid out for the entire industry. It's often like what I look at when you look back at Tim Berners-Lee when he developed HTML for the World Wide Web. That was how e-commerce spawned. That was how social media spawned. All of those things begin to build upon that baseline. And essentially, that's what you're talking about. I want to jump to the chart here quickly just to show you where Bitcoin's run is currently moving and what we are watching for with what we should call the ETF watch, because this is a very important thing. Let me get my brush out here just to show you guys. So we're actually overperforming right now outside of what our prediction window is for Bitcoin. We talked a little about this earlier. I am a little bit worried about this period of time right here, which is going to be between really around October 11th to around the 17th, which is where we could have a little bit of downward pressure. And if this occurs, then there is going to be a potential buying opportunity out here. If it does not, and we continue to see this kind of tracking, you have this section right here, which is really a potential high right here before we see a new high right here at around the 62K. And again, this little zone right here, this little trough right here, is the one that we have to break, because that is the 60K psychological number that we've got to get past. This could occur around the end of October. Timing is really interesting when you look at how sentiment is tracking out against this. And sentiment is tracking people talking about Bitcoin ETFs, people talking about Bitcoin purchases, investing in it, all those kind of things that we feed in on our standard NLP algorithm, which is just natural language processing, identification of all these terms that are being used. That's essentially what drives the focus of cryptocurrency investing. And really, it drives all of investing. Anything that's moved by pop culture and moved by culture in general is done in these social media platforms, which then equates to money flow. Money flow, and then, of course, moves projects. So that's how it works. And I think with those kind of scenarios, we've been able to identify some pretty interesting things. And I want to just go back to the chart here, because our sentiment data has been dead on. If you follow it all the way back here from mid-August, I mean, we were literally hitting it time and time again. One outside the bubble right here, moved, we called this line, and this line right here, another outside the bubble. I know it's a lot of yellow marks, but that essentially has been our scorecard, and we kind of keep this on a running chart, tracking through what's happening right now. And again, we always look at this because remember, data can shift based on sentiment explosions. So if you get something like a BTC ETF that drops, Gensler kind of releases the Kraken, maybe a deal with the XRP is done, all of those kind of things that could compile on top of each other, that's a different scenario. That changes the dynamics very quickly, and that's when we could see parabolic moves other than what we've seen here. Even though, it's been not a bad parabolic move from the low at right there at 40,900, and we've spiked right up here to 55,900, 56,000. We are moving quickly and things are happening. So as you guys are investing out there, make sure and stay safe. Remember, these are market movers. The idea with market movers are very simple. We'll put together data, some research analysis, and then feed you guys back, hopefully a direction that's going to help you out. Not investment advice, but it's designed to help you move on to your next direction and how you're doing your next investment strategy. Whether it's on cryptocurrency, innovation stocks, AI, EVs, all those, we'll try to cover more. And I know we've been getting a few more comments wanting us to kind of spread our wings a little bit in terms of EV stocks, some of the new innovation in technology stocks. We are seeing some action over there. And we will get back to those, but obviously it's kind of like any news channel out there. When you have the main story today is cryptocurrency and this massive bull run that we are in the middle of. Hopefully you guys are investing wise and smart out there and really experiencing some amazing games. We also have a lot coming to you on NFTs and gaming, so make sure and stay tuned for all that. Don't forget the Diamond Circle. You want to get back over there and join. It's very simple. Go to paulbaronnetwork.com. It's free, absolutely free for you. And there's lots of benefits in our live streams where we'll be doing airdrops back to our community. You want to give us an idea for the show? Drop it in the comments below or hit me up on Twitter @PaulBaron. We'll catch you next time right here on TechPath.